On June 12, SpaceX went public on Nasdaq and Elon Musk became the first trillionaire in human history. Let's rewind the clock. The first billionaire was John D. Rockefeller. The first person to hit 10 billion was Paul Getty. The first to reach 100 billion was Bill Gates. And now, the first to cross $1 trillion, that's Musk. To put that number in perspective, it exceeds Switzerland's entire annual GDP, placing it comfortably among the world's top 20 economies. But what Musk has truly left the world is not his wealth. It's his ideas. $1 trillion net worth is merely a byproduct of the way he thinks. SpaceX surged 19% on its first day of trading, reaching a total market cap of $2.1 trillion. This was the answer one so-called madman delivered to the world after 24 years of darkness and countless near-dash bankruptcies. In 2002, Musk used the money from selling PayPal to found SpaceX. His original idea was to send a small greenhouse to the surface of Mars, a device that could grow plants. At the time, he gave the company less than a 10% chance of success. He said, "I told the people around me that we would most likely fail. But if we didn't try, if we didn't build a completely new company dedicated to breaking through the barriers of space technology, humanity would never become a truly interplanetary civilization." Over 24 years, SpaceX endured 3 consecutive failed launches of the Falcon 1, and came within days of running out of money. Then, just 8 weeks after the third failure, the 4th launch finally reached orbit, making SpaceX the first private company to put a liquid-fueled rocket into orbit. From there came reusable rockets, the Starlink satellite network, space-based AI infrastructure. SpaceX grew from a tiny operation in a small warehouse into a complex technology platform spanning aerospace, communications, and artificial intelligence. So what kind of person is Elon Musk, really? Some call him a Silicon Valley legend. Others call him a tech lunatic. He works an average of 80 to 100 hours a week, and by his own account, there might be 2 or 3 days a year where he doesn't really work. He was a voracious reader from childhood. By age 8 or 9, he had worked through the entire Encyclopedia Britannica. As a teenager, he read 2 books a day across different disciplines. He swears by first principles thinking, refusing to be constrained by convention. He champions the supremacy of engineering and the pursuit of radical simplicity. He is surrounded by controversy, yet his gaze has never wavered. In June 2026, with SpaceX's IPO, Elon Musk became the first person on Earth to surpass $1 trillion in personal net worth. Go back to 1999, he sold his first company, Zip2, and walked away with around $22 million, already unimaginable wealth for most people. From 22 million to 1 trillion in just over 2 decades, roughly 4 orders of magnitude. 1 man, simultaneously building rockets, electric cars, brain-computer interfaces, and AI, while also buying one of the world's largest social media platforms. Whether you like him or not, 2 questions are worth taking seriously. Why did he rise to the top in this particular era, and can his approach be replicated? This is an examination with respect, one that doesn't deny his genuine strengths, but also doesn't look away from an increasingly glaring question. When $1 trillion company after another is almost entirely tied to the narrative of a single individual, is that the magic of a genius, or a dangerous warning sign? Part 1. Translating the audacity into facts. Before evaluating anyone, look at what they've actually built. Strip away the slogans and the controversies, and the companies Musk runs are, in terms of scale, very much real. SpaceX and Starlink are his hardest cards. In 2025, SpaceX completed 165 orbital launches, setting a new record for the 6th consecutive year. Reusable rockets have dramatically lowered launch costs, a shift widely considered the financial turning point for commercial spaceflight. Starlink, its satellite internet service, surpassed 12 million active users as of June 2026, with over 10,000 satellites in orbit, the largest satellite constellation in human history. Tesla transformed electric vehicles from a niche gadget for tech enthusiasts into a genuine disruptor of the mainstream automotive market. The Model Y briefly became the best-selling car in the world, including combustion vehicles, something once considered unthinkable. XAI, Neuralink, Starship. The Boring Company, he has placed bets in nearly every direction that sounded like science fiction. In early 2024, Neuralink completed its first human brain implant, allowing a quadriplegic patient to control a computer cursor with his thoughts. But being objective means looking at the other side too. Tesla's vehicle deliveries declined for 2 consecutive years in 2024 and 2025, and in 2025 it was overtaken by BYD in pure electric vehicle sales for the first time. The long-anticipated Cybertruck posted far weaker sales than projected, and full self-driving, marketed with enormous fanfare, remains technically only an L2 driver assistance system that requires constant human supervision and is currently under regulatory investigation. So he is neither an omnipotent god nor a hollow blowhard. He is someone who has turned some of his wildest visions into reality, while also leaving behind a long list of unfulfilled promises. Keep that in mind as we go deeper. Part 2. Why this era chose him here is a fact that's easy to overlook. The same Elon Musk, born 20 years earlier, almost certainly would not be the Elon Musk we know today. His rise was a rare resonance between personal traits and the tailwinds of his era. Both were essential. Let's talk about the era first. Point 4. Structural forces happened to converge at the same time. First, money was cheap. After the 2008 financial crisis, the Federal Reserve cut interest rates to near zero and kept them there for roughly 7 years. A flood of cheap capital was looking for a home, and companies with big stories but no profits found it easier than ever to raise money. Tesla was the textbook beneficiary. In 2020 alone, it raised roughly $12 billion through stock issuance. In a world where capital is expensive, betting everything on deep technology simply doesn't work. Second, 3 technology cost curves hit bottom simultaneously. The price of lithium battery packs fell by roughly 89% between 2010 and 2021. That's what finally made mass-market electric vehicles possible. Reusable rocket technology matured in the 2010s, cutting orbital launch costs by an order of magnitude. Electric vehicles, commercial spaceflight, and artificial intelligence all reached their inflection points within the same narrow window. Musk's greatest edge was that he positioned himself at every single one of these convergence points. Third, the visible hand of the U.S. government. This is often glossed over by his admirers, but it matters enormously. In late 2008, a NASA contract worth approximately $1.6 billion pulled SpaceX back from the edge of bankruptcy. In 2010, a low-interest loan of $465 million from the U.S. Department of Energy helped Tesla save its factory. By some estimates from 2015, the cumulative government support received by his companies totaled around $4.9 billion. This is not an accusation, it's a reminder that his success was deeply intertwined with public policy from the very beginning. Fourth, social media amplified the personal brand equals company brand dynamic. Tesla has long spent almost nothing on traditional advertising, saving billions annually that competitors pay because Musk himself is a media company. His personal accounts have hundreds of millions of followers. A single tweet is a global product launch. Now, the personal side, having the right tailwinds isn't enough. Plenty of pigs don't fly even in a hurricane. There are a few things about Musk that genuinely stand out. He champions first principles thinking, rather than reasoning by analogy or convention. He breaks problems down to their most fundamental physical facts and rebuilds from there. He once calculated that the raw material cost of a rocket was only a fraction of its selling price, so why not build it yourself? This logic led directly to his signature move, extreme vertical integration. SpaceX manufactures a huge proportion of its own rocket components in-house, enabling rapid iteration and dramatic cost reduction. He also has a near-extreme tolerance for risk. In 2008, he poured virtually all of the money he'd made from PayPal into 3 companies at once, and at one point had to borrow money from friends to cover daily expenses. That year, Tesla's life-saving funding round was closed on Christmas Eve. At the last possible moment. He later called it the most painful year of my life. Part 3. Can his success be replicated? This is the question most people want answered. And when you put together everything we've discussed, the answer becomes clear. His methodology can be studied, but Musk himself cannot be replicated. The parts worth learning are real. First principles thinking. When facing a problem, don't rush to copy what others in your industry do. Ask first, what are the most fundamental constraints here? His famous interview question. Ask candidates to walk you through the hardest problem they've ever actually solved, because someone who truly did it can. Always describe every single step of how they got there, and using a grand, vivid vision to attract exceptional talent. Many people are willing to give everything for a story like making humanity a multi-planetary species. These ways of thinking are genuinely useful for anyone who wants to build something, but the parts that can't be replicated are probably greater in number. First, the timing. The four forces we discussed were products of specific historical conditions. They may never align the same way again. Second, the starting point. The roughly $180 million he cashed out from PayPal gave him the go-all-in confidence that most founders simply don't have. Without that first pot of gold, even the best methodology has nowhere to stand. Third, the capacity to absorb risk and pain and its costs. He could sleep on factory floors and work under relentless pressure, but that came with real physical burnout and real costs to his teams. Multiple investigative reports have noted that his factories were criticized by labor regulators for prioritizing speed over safety. This approach is not only hard to replicate, it may not deserve to be unconditionally admired. Fourth, survivorship bias. We remember the Musk who succeeded. We don't see the people with similar talent, similar all-in bets, who never made it to the other side. Attributing a single case of success simply to the right method is itself a cognitive trap. Point 1. Final thought. Replication doesn't have to mean one thing. China has not produced a Musk with the same flamboyant personality, but across solar energy, energy storage, and electric vehicles, a wave of Chinese companies is quietly turning what once seemed like science fiction into reality, in a more pragmatic and far less dramatic way. Perhaps what truly deserves to be replicated was never his personality, but the willingness to bet everything, long-term, on deep technology. Part 4. The biggest question, when a trillion-dollar company is tied to one person's story. Let's be fair. First, Musk's personal brand is a genuine asset. He barely runs traditional advertising, yet through his personal influence alone, he saves Tesla the billions in annual marketing spend that competitors pay, while simultaneously using a grand vision to attract top-tier talent and massive capital. That is a real and remarkable edge, and it's why many people genuinely admire him. But the other side of this coin may be the most important thing to understand about him. When a company and a brand is almost entirely tied to a single individual's personal narrative, it carries enormous embedded risk. When SpaceX filed its IPO prospectus in June 2026, that risk was spelled out in black and white across dozens of pages. The document repeatedly emphasized a single phrase: the company is highly dependent on Musk personally. Interestingly, while calling him the driving force behind its growth and success, SpaceX did not take out any key person insurance on him. Point 1. Commentator put it bluntly: Musk is simultaneously SpaceX's greatest engine and its greatest risk variable, and its valuation depends almost entirely on how much people believe in Musk. Even more telling were the terms written for him personally. Through a dual-class share structure, Musk retains approximately 82.4% of the voting rights after the IPO, meaning that regardless of how many shares the public buys, ordinary investors have almost no voice in major company decisions. The board cannot even remove him without his own consent. At the same time, the prospectus grants him an astronomical equity compensation package, roughly 1.3 billion shares, tied to a series of targets that read like science fiction, establishing a permanent colony of at least 1 million people on Mars, pushing the company's market cap to as high as approximately $7.5 trillion, and building computing infrastructure with power consumption on the scale of the entire United States, with a long-term vision reaching roughly double that. The subtlest detail: the prospectus itself, in its accounting treatment, classifies these targets as not probable of achievement. So why design the package this way? Some analysts suggest the real function of these incentives isn't to be achieved, it's to lock in. Because even before the shares vest, the supervoting rights attached to them have already landed in his pocket. In other words, whether the targets are met is secondary. What matters is that control is permanently welded in place. On the very day of SpaceX's IPO, Nobel Prize-winning economist Paul Krugman published a column with the headline, "The Human Ponzi Scheme." He argued that Musk is essentially a human Ponzi scheme, not referring to any single company, but to Musk himself. His wealth, Krugman suggested, is largely built on a self-reinforcing loop of belief. Investors believe he's a genius, so they keep bidding up valuations. High valuations, in turn, reinforce the genius mythology. That label hits hard. To be fair, a Ponzi scheme, by definition, has no real assets, it pays early investors with money from later ones. Musk has rockets that actually fly, cars that actually drive, and businesses that actually generate cash flow. That is fundamentally different from promises built on nothing, a point Krugman himself doesn't deny, but what he does skewer is harder to argue with. When a trillion-dollar company's valuation is primarily sustained by belief in this person, it becomes tied to the tides of that belief. When belief holds, the valuation holds. When belief retreats, a trillion-dollar market cap could retreat with ITS. For Musk personally, the controversies pile up, full self-driving that has been pushed back again and again. The 2018 tweet claiming he had secured funding to take Tesla private, which cost him a $20 million SEC fine. These episodes serve as reminders that his narrative sometimes outruns reality. Conclusion: what should we actually learn from him? Back to the 3 words in the title: genius, survivor, Ponzi scheme architect. At the end of the day, Musk may be all 3, simultaneously. A genuine genius who turned wild visions into reality. A survivor who happened to catch every tailwind of his era. And someone whose company's valuations are so thoroughly anchored to his personal story that the Ponzi-like critique is not entirely without merit. If there are 2 things worth taking away from him, here they are. What is worth learning? That relentless drive to break problems down to their foundations and bet everything on the long term, refusing to be handcuffed by convention, and being willing to invest where others say it's impossible. What deserves caution: mistaking a personal mythology for a methodology. Ignoring the historical tailwinds, the head start, and the luck beneath his feet, and blindly mimicking the posture of sleep in the factory. Go all in. It's fine to miss your promises, will most likely get you only the form, while you pay a price you never needed to pay. The best way to understand Musk may be neither to worship him nor to dismiss him, but to place him back in the era that produced him. Toc clearly which parts were his own doing, which parts were gifts from his time, and which parts the rest of us don't need and shouldn't try to copy. Because in the end, understanding a legend is not about trying to replicate someone else's fate. It's about walking your own path with clearer eyes. Postscript: the numbers behind the IPO. Just 2 days after SpaceX's IPO on June 12, Musk took to social media and declared that the company could realistically reach approximately $1 trillion in annual revenue by 2030. I would be surprised if revenue hasn't crossed $1 trillion by 2031, he said. Morgan Stanley had previously forecast SpaceX's revenue growing from $18.7 billion in 2025 to $160 billion in 2028, and reaching $330 billion by 2030. Musk's projection is roughly 3 times higher than Morgan Stanley's. According to the IPO prospectus, SpaceX's total 2025 revenue grew 33% year-over-year. Starlink, the core cash cow, generated $11.4 billion in revenue, 61% of the total, with operating profit of $4.42 billion, and over 10 million users by end of 2025. The rocket launch business, while commanding roughly 80% of the global commercial launch market, generated $4.086 billion in revenue but posted a loss of $657 million, dragged down by Starship development costs. The AI division, folded in after the xAI merger, was the biggest money pit, $3.2 billion in revenue against an operating loss of $6.355 billion, with cumulative losses since founding reaching $41.3 billion in 2025 alone. SpaceX posted a net loss of $4.9 billion as of March 2026. That figure was projected to widen to $8.7 billion, with long-term debt standing at $29.1 billion. SpaceX's current structure spans 3 business lines: rocket launches, Starlink, and Space AI. Falcon 9 and Starship provide low-cost orbital access. Starlink has over 9 million users and more than 9,300 satellites in orbit. The Space AI unit targets an estimated $28.5 trillion addressable market, though analysts note that roughly 90% of that comes from the AI side of the business, not from the more established, cash-generating Starlink and launch businesses. Whether xAI can break through in an increasingly fierce AI landscape remains deeply uncertain. The IPO itself was historic. Priced at $135 per share, SpaceX raised $75 billion in the largest IPO ever. IT attracted more than $350 billion in institutional and retail demand, with institutional subscriptions alone exceeding $250 billion. Valued at approximately $1.8 trillion, the stock surged 19.22% on day one, closing at $160.95, pushing the market cap past $2.1 trillion and making SpaceX the seventh largest publicly listed company in the world, just behind Amazon and TSMC. Proceeds are earmarked as follows. Approximately $30 billion for orbital AI computing infrastructure, $20 billion for Starship mass production and launch facility expansion, $15 billion for Starlink V3 satellite upgrades and direct-to-cell mobile service, and the remaining $10 billion for high-interest debt repayment and working capital. Musk holds roughly 42% of the company. With the stock surge, his personal net worth crossed $1 trillion, making him the first trillionaire in history, with wealth exceeding the annual GDP of many nations. According to equity platform Hill.com, of SpaceX's more than 20,000 employees, roughly 4,400 current and former staff members now hold shares worth more than $1 million, with approximately 400 set to join the ranks of billionaires. Early investors have also cleaned up. Saudi Arabia's Kingdom Holding Company disclosed a position of approximately 42.4 million Class A shares, with a fair value of around $6.83 billion at closing price. Alphabet holds roughly 7%, corresponding to over $150 billion in market value. Vela Equity Partners holds 4%, booking nearly $70 billion in paper gains. Sequoia Capital and Cathie Wood's ARK Invest both hold positions worth tens of billions. Veteran investor Ron Barron, who invested a cumulative $2 billion, now holds a stake worth $12 billion, one of the biggest. Personal winners from this space age bonanza. On the first day of trading, 4 ARK active ETFs simultaneously bought SpaceX shares, roughly 3.29 million shares in total, while simultaneously trimming positions in Tesla, AMD, Baidu, Rocket Lab, and CrowdStrike. Cathie Wood has repeatedly stated publicly that SpaceX is one of the most promising disruptive innovators she has ever seen, and that its core value lies not just in its launch business, but in Starlink as a global communications backbone.arc's research suggests the global space economy could exceed $1 trillion within the next decade, with Starlink potentially becoming one of the world's largest communications infrastructure networks. Would personally view SpaceX as a long-term growth asset, combining aerospace, AI, communications, and defense technology. Banks underwriting the IPO, Morgan Stanley and Goldman Sachs, pointed to Starlink's moat and AI growth potential. But long-horizon institutions like Danish pension funds pushed back, arguing the current valuation